6 rings, a Hall of Fame career, a player so complete that LeBron James modeled his game after him. Yet for decades his name was whispered, never shouted. Scottie Pippen, the man who built a dynasty, carried a team, and redefined what it means to be a two-way superstar, lived in the shadows of legends. But why did the man who had it all still feel invisible? Behind the glory, behind the highlights, a life of pain, betrayal, and unimaginable loss. This isn't the story of stats or championships. This is the story of the cost of greatness, when the world only sees the man standing next to you. The loss that broke him. Scottie Pippen had endured more pain than most people experience in 10 lifetimes. Poverty that starved his childhood. A father who couldn't move. A brother who couldn't walk. A career spent being undervalued, underpaid, and overshadowed. Marriages that crumbled. Friends who disappeared. Trust that was betrayed over and over again. He had survived all of it. He had built walls around his heart strong enough to withstand anything life could throw at him. And then, life found the one thing that could break those walls completely. Antron was Scottie's firstborn son. The child who had witnessed his father rise from nobody to legend. Before the championships, before the fame, before the world knew Scottie Pippen's name, there was a young father and his little boy sharing cheap meals in tiny apartments. They would split French fries at fast food restaurants, watch NBA games on a small television, talk for hours about basketball and dreams and the future. Scottie would hold his son close and make a silent promise. "You will have a better life than I did. You will never know the hunger I knew. You will never feel invisible the way I felt invisible." But fate had other plans. Antron was diagnosed with chronic asthma, a condition that turned every breath into a battle. The attacks came without warning. One moment he would be fine. The next moment, he would collapse, face pale, chest tightening like an invisible hand was crushing his lungs. Scottie remembered the frantic midnight drives to emergency rooms, hands trembling on the steering wheel, eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall in front of his son. He remembered sitting in hospital waiting rooms, staring at the clock, praying to a God he wasn't sure was listening. He remembered the sight of Antron on hospital beds with oxygen tubes in his nose, the steady beeping of heart monitors becoming a sound that would haunt his dreams for decades. But Antron never complained. He had his father's strength, that quiet resilience that refuses to break no matter how much pressure bears down. He wanted to play basketball like his dad. And Scottie, though terrified of what exertion might do to his son's lungs, encouraged him. Because he knew that dream was the flame keeping Antron alive. Father and son would talk for hours about the NBA, about favorite players, about the games Scottie had played. In those conversations, Scottie found something his career had never given him: being truly seen, being truly heard, being loved not for championships or statistics, but simply for being a father. Then the phone call came, the call that no parent is ever prepared for, the call that destroys everything. Antron had passed away, suddenly, without warning. Asthma had taken his life before anyone could say goodbye, before Scottie could fly to his side, before a father could hold his son one last time and tell him everything he should have said more often. Scottie doesn't remember dropping the phone, doesn't remember how he ended up on the floor. He only remembers the scream that tore from his throat, a sound he had never made in 60 years of living. It wasn't the sound of a legend. It wasn't the sound of a 6-time champion. It was the sound of a father having his soul ripped out through his chest, while his heart kept beating against its will. At the funeral, Scottie stood, beside the casket, gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had to lean on relatives to stay upright, not because of the back that had been destroyed by years of sacrifice on the court, because grief had stolen every ounce of strength from his body. When they lowered Antron into the ground, Scottie fell to his knees, trembling, tears streaming down his face, no longer caring who was watching, no longer caring about image or legacy or what the world thought of him. A legend with 6 championship rings, and he couldn't save his own child. The house felt bigger after that, emptier. Every room reminded him of Antron. Every silence screamed his son's name. Scottie sat in the chair where they used to watch games together, staring at nothing, replaying every moment he wished he had handled differently. If only I had skipped one more game to see him. If only I had flown to him that time he said he was tired. If only I had told him I loved him every single day instead of assuming he knew. Those regrets became knives that cut him every morning he woke up and every night he couldn't sleep. People say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. For Scottie, time only carved the wound deeper. Antron wasn't just his son. He was the witness to the years before fame, the purest love of his life, the pride he cherished more than any trophy. Losing Antron was losing the best part of himself, and that loss would never heal. It would only teach him how to carry an unhealable wound without collapsing. A lifetime of wounds. The tragedy of Antron was the final blow. But to understand why it shattered Scottie so completely, you have to understand everything that came before. A lifetime of wounds that had already cracked the foundation of his soul. Scottie Pippen grew up in Hamburg, Arkansas, a town so small and so poor that winter wind blew straight through the cracks in his family's walls. The house was barely standing, rotting wooden planks, holes in the ceiling that let rain fall directly onto the floor. His mother placed rusty basins around the rooms to catch the water, a daily reminder that everything in their lives was slowly falling apart. Scottie was one of 12 children, 12 hungry mouths, 12 bodies crammed into a house that couldn't properly shelter even one. There were days when dinner was old potato slices his mother salvaged from someone else's storage. There were mornings when Scottie walked to school with an empty stomach, wearing clothes too big for his body, pretending he wasn't hungry, wasn't cold, wasn't different. Then his father, Preston Pippen, suffered a massive stroke. The man who had been the family's foundation suddenly lay motionless, paralyzed on one side, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed his commands. Scottie watched his father cry tears he couldn't wipe away, watched his mother suppress her sobs so she wouldn't break down in front of her children. That wound followed him for life. Not the fear of poverty, something deeper. The fear of being unable to help the people he loved. His older brother Ronnie became disabled next, confined to a wheelchair forever. Scottie watched Ronnie try to move legs that would never work again, try to stand when standing was impossible. It was a daily reminder that life destroys dreams without apology. His mother, Ethel, stretched herself between caring for her husband, her disabled son, 12 children, and multiple jobs. She came home after dark with trembling legs and hands roughened by decades of labor. Scottie often found her asleep at the sink, too exhausted to walk to bed. In that house filled with illness and struggle, Scottie grew up in silence. He spoke little, smiled little, cried little, not because he felt nothing, but because showing emotion only made everything hurt more. While other kids played basketball, Scottie watched from the sidelines. He had no shoes. While other kids dreamed of futures, Scottie didn't dare dream at all. Deep inside was a feeling worse than hunger. The feeling of being invisible. The feeling that no one expected anything from him. The feeling that he wasn't worth remembering. The tragedies didn't stop when he became famous. His first marriage ended. His second marriage to Larsa became a wound the whole world watched bleed. What began as refuge from a lifetime of pain slowly crumbled into silence, scandal, and public humiliation. The tabloid headlines dragged his name through dirt. But Scottie never fought back. He just quietly endured, like he had endured his entire life. When the divorce finalized, he walked through the big, empty house, hearing only his own footsteps echoing back. Friends drifted away, some from illness, some from old age, some from misunderstandings that never got resolved. Investments failed. People he trusted stole from him. He lost millions to fraudulent deals and false promises. The man who had been exploited by the Bulls organization was now being exploited by everyone who saw his name as an opportunity. And through all of it, Scottie kept standing, kept moving forward, kept refusing to let the darkness swallow him whole. Until Antron. Antron was the wound that proved even the strongest walls can fall. The rise from nothing. Understanding the tragedies makes his rise even more extraordinary. Scottie Pippen didn't become a legend despite his pain. He became a legend because every wound became fuel. Every rejection became fire. Every moment of being invisible became determination to make the world see him. When Scottie reached college age, no scholarship offers came. No coaches wanted the skinny kid from Arkansas. He found a place at the University of Central Arkansas, but not as a player. They made him the team manager. His job was to clean lockers, collect sweaty uniforms, mop the gym floor. Every day he watched real athletes practice while he stood on the sidelines like a ghost. Nobody called him by name. He was just the janitor in a faded shirt, hoping someone might notice him. Then his body changed. He grew dramatically, wingspan extending, frame filling out. It wasn't luck. It was desperation made physical, as if his body was fighting to give him one last chance. The new height earned him a tryout. In those few minutes on the court, the coach noticed what life had tried to bury. Scottie Pippen had real talent. Talent forged from hunger and invisibility. He trained like survival depended on it because it did. He pushed his body until it bled, knowing one failure would drag him back to poverty. That fear became fuel. The janitor nobody wanted became a player nobody could stop. The 1987 draft brought him to Chicago, traded like merchandise, welcomed by no one. The Bulls already had their king, Michael Jordan. Everything revolved around MJ. Scottie walked into that world and felt invisible all over again. But this time, he knew how to transform invisibility into power. He became the defender who suffocated opponents before they could think. The playmaker who ran the offense. The glue holding everything together. He sacrificed his ego so completely that his contributions became invisible by design. Jordan was the flame. Scottie was the atmosphere letting that flame burn. Without him, no 6 championships. Without him, no dynasty. But the world only saw the flame. The shadow and the sacrifice. In 1991, Scottie Pippen signed a 7-year contract worth $18 million. To the outside world, it looked like a fortune. To Scottie, it was a chain forged from desperation. He signed it because his father was paralyzed and needed constant medical care. Because his brother Ronnie was confined to a wheelchair and couldn't work. Because his mother had spent her entire life breaking her body to feed 12 children, and deserved to finally rest. The Pippen family was drowning, and Scottie needed money immediately. Not next year, not after negotiations. Now. The Bulls knew this. They knew exactly how desperate he was. And instead of protecting the young player who would become essential to their dynasty, they exploited his pain. Jerry Krause, the general manager Scottie would later call the nightmare of his career, used the suffering of Scottie's family as leverage. They locked him into a contract longer than anyone in the NBA dared sign at that time. 7 years. 7 seasons of being underpaid while carrying a championship team on his shoulders. During the glory years when the Bulls dominated the league, when Scottie was earning all-star selections and all-defensive honors, when he was the reason opponents couldn't score and Jordan could fly, Scottie Pippen ranked 122nd in NBA salary, lower than bench players who barely saw the court, lower than rookies who hadn't proven a single thing. The man holding the dynasty together was being paid like a replacement part. He asked to renegotiate multiple times. They refused every time. He had signed the contract. His family's suffering was his burden to carry, not theirs. Game 6 of the 1998 Finals became the perfect symbol of everything Scottie sacrificed. The night before, he barely slept. His back pain had reached a level doctors rated as unsurvivable for professional competition. Every movement sent fire shooting through his spine, down his legs, up into his neck. That morning, when he bent down to tie his shoes, the pain exploded so intensely he nearly collapsed. He couldn't stand straight, couldn't take a full breath without agony. But when the team needed him, he walked onto the court anyway. Because the Bulls couldn't win without him. Because the dynasty couldn't end with him watching from the bench. In the final seconds of that game, with the championship hanging in the balance, Jordan received the ball for what the world would later call the greatest shot in NBA history. But before Jordan could create that moment, someone had to free him. Someone had to set the screen that gave him space. That someone was Scottie Pippen, with a back that felt like shattered glass grinding against his nerves, setting a pick that history would completely forget. Nobody remembers that screen. Nobody talks about the sacrifice that made the miracle possible. After the final buzzer, while the arena erupted in celebration, while confetti rained down and cameras swarmed Jordan, Scottie limped toward the locker room alone. He couldn't sit on the bench because bending made his back seize completely. He leaned against the cold wall, breathing in short gasps, body trembling from pain he had hidden for 48 minutes. No cameras followed him. No reporters asked how he felt. No spotlight found him in that moment. Just a man with a broken back, shaking in the shadows, knowing he had helped create a championship that history would credit entirely to someone else. Then came The Last Dance. The documentary that was supposed to honor the Bulls dynasty instead became the wound that refused to heal. Scottie watched the series not as a celebration, but as a nightmare turned into film. The story wasn't about the Bulls. It was about Jordan. And in that story, Scottie was reduced to a supporting character, a loyal sidekick, a shadow given just enough screen time to make the sun look brighter. When Jordan called him selfish on camera, in front of millions of viewers worldwide, Scottie felt the knife twist in decades of loyalty. He had given his back, his health, his prime, his ego, his entire identity. He had sacrificed everything a man could sacrifice for that dynasty. And his reward was being diminished in his own story by the very man he had spent his career protecting. The betrayal didn't come from enemies. It came from the person Scottie had considered a brother, and that made it hurt more than any injury ever could. But the story doesn't end here. Scottie Pippen's battles were never just on the court. They were in the contracts he signed, the trust he gave, the family he loved, and the shadows he carried. The questions remain. How does a man endure when the world sees only the legend beside him? And what does it truly cost to be great when your greatness is measured in someone else's shadow? The answers aren't in the stats, they're scars, and the next chapter is waiting to be uncovered.